In honor of Denver's decriminalization of magic mushrooms, doctors of Reddit, what, if any, is your best story of patients on hallucinogenics? In a busy urban ed, one unkempt-looking man with altered mental status sits calmly and tiredly in a bed along the wall in the hallway. As I walk by, he grabs me, with a worried look on his face, and says in the most classic stoner voice, "Hey, man. Why does the time on that clock keep changing?" Me, "That's what it's supposed to do." Patient, "Oh yeah." Laughs. Still one of my most memorable encounters. Had a friend become impatient with mushrooms once. He took an eighth, and an hour later decided they weren't very strong, so the most logical thing to do would be eat his other eighth. Cut to 2 hours later, and he is parked on top of a parking garage. Tried to drive across town when they kicked in and he immediately realized his fuck up. He tried to wait it out, but after being abandoned by everyone else, I wasn't around. No way in hell would I have left the poor guy on 7 grams of shrooms to his own devices, and he decides he needs help. So he calls 911. While on the phone he wants to be as honest as possible, so he tells them about his .22 caliber rifle behind the seat of his truck. Only it comes out as, "There's a gun in the car." He says he was tripping and sweating so badly, it was July. The next thing he remembers is hearing a tink 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 and looking up to being surrounded by police, guns drawn and ready for anything. Friend isn't a danger though, so they get him in an ambulance, and give him charcoal to induce vomiting. The rest of the night is a blur for him, and he wakes up cuffed to the bed. They ask him if there's anyone he can call for a ride, and he tells them his mom is a nurse who works on the second floor. Apparently while tripping he kept telling them to go upstairs and get mom, so they all have a chuckle realizing his mom really was upstairs. Was working night shift on inpatient service. Ed called to admit someone. "We've got a 17-year-old down here with altered mental status. We think he needs to be admitted for eval/monitoring. VSS, chem fine, etc. etc. Now, I'm not a pediatrician. I don't do kids. I don't understand why the Ed is calling me. But, I'm an intern and it's 2 in the morning, so arguing about it is stupid. I headed to the Ed. I get there to see a young dude sitting there with his parents. I'll mention that his dad was a full bird colonel and very much fit the archetype, and his mom seemed to fit that type of personality, too. The kid is literally rolling around in his bed, alternating between crying, asking if he was going to die, rubbing his dad's hand, and telling him how much he loved him. I had to sit there, and take a history with a straight face from a 17-year-old who kept being distracted by just how much he loved his dad. I think my first question was, "Did you take anything, tonight?" And he was straight up and said, "Oh, yeah, like a shit ton of acid. Want any?" I 100% laughed at this statement. His dad was not amused. The patient was discharged the next morning. I had a guy who was freaking out thinking he was going to die because he thought he had eaten too many hallucinogenic mushrooms. He went online and saw that sometimes patients are given activated charcoal to soak up the mushrooms in the stomach, not entirely true BTW. So he goes outside and starts chowing down on charcoal briquettes that he has in his garage for grilling. After about a dozen he realizes, holy shit, I'm eating charcoal briquettes. Now he is really freaking out, so he grabs his dog, as the thinks he is never coming back to his house, and drives himself to the Ed. He parks out front, walks into triage with the pup, black charcoal all over his face and hands, and says, "I need a doctor and someone to watch my dog when I die." I was actually interviewing/shadowing for a job in a trauma department. A patient came in after having a gigantic log roll over him. He was a lumberjack? Trucker? Either way, he had an open ankle fracture, which means the bone is sticking out. He was obviously in a lot of pain. In order to set the ankle, he was given some fentanyl. I don't remember the dose. He went from literally screaming in pain to literally singing about having a pizza party. I'll never forget, we're gonna to have a pizza party. Pizza for everybody. Had a woman come into the Ed after ingesting some PCP. She was convinced she was dead and kept telling me she didn't get her last rites. At one point she stripped off all her clothes and shat the bed. Also mistook me for Jesus at one point. She was freaking out for nearly 24 hours. When I was a medical student, I saw a guy high as balls on PCP. I was working with a tiny little Asian chick who was a PGY3 resident, and when we walked in the room, this giant naked white dude high as hell sees her and screams that she was the devil or something. Guy lunges at her, and the cop in the room promptly slams him onto the bed. I try to help like any med student working in the field they want to match in, and I swing around behind the guy, who's actively winning the MMA match with the cop, and grab him into a chokehold. Excellent bedside manner was a comment I got on my slip that day. I pin him for a femtosecond before he realizes he's crispy as shit on that good old phencyclidine, and he springs his upper body forward, swinging me over the back of the bed seat right onto his lap. It took me like 5 seconds to realize what happened. I noped out of there right before the police tased him into oblivion. Hours later he was asking us rather politely for some orange juice with all 4 limbs restrained. Did he get his orange juice? Yep, sure did. As a nurse, patient came in running in the ER asking for a blood transfusion cause he believed that vampire bit his neck. Patient has no any visible marks or scars. Held him down for a while and asked him to calm down. He was so frightened that he asked for garlic to keep the vampires away. Eventually he calmed down and walked out on his own with no problem. Hope that you're reading this. I want to take what you're taking. I'm a doctor but I've never seen a patient come in on hallucinogens. But outside of work, my favorite was a Russian guy in a hostel in Amsterdam who forgot how to speak for 8 hours but could barely write English, so it was like a really long game of Pictionary for the poor fella. That's all for today's video. If you liked it, make sure to subscribe and let us know what you want to see next. Also, check us out on Twitter @ThatWasFunny. Thanks for watching. Until next time.